as everybody has said, several people have gotten up there and said, we need this study. It's the first step to figure out what we do next. I would urge every single person in this room to please vote yes on the warrant.
Thank you. Mr. Rowe.
I was opposed to this, and the reason I was opposed to this is because I got the same thing you're getting tonight. All kinds of different information, and it was too difficult actually to make a decision. One of the things I know I questioned about, and they talk about economic development. Well, sewerage will help, but it's only one thing. You have to do a number of other things. You have to change your zoning laws. So that means if you bring it in on Concord Street, you're going to change the zoning laws in Concord Street before you can do anything else. Because you can't put higher buildings up, you can't put, skyscrapers or high-rise or whatever. You're limited on the size of the buildings, you're limited in your square footage. So you've got to change all those bylaws before you're going to improve your economic development. The reason we have the postal annex right now, where we have it on Main Street, is because we refuse to zone that deeper from highway business so that we could put in industrial shopping center or whatever, because the people don't want it in the neighborhoods. So the people in those neighborhoods are going to be affected because they're going to have to change the zoning laws to do any good. This is not a Burroughs Road or a Martins Pond problem or a Concord Street. This is a town of North Reading. You go up on the hills, you go in the low valleys, people have trouble with their septic system. Brand new houses, when I say brand new houses, not 4 or 5 years old, are having trouble with their septic systems. It's a town-wide problem. It should be addressed on a town-wide problem. And we did in the past, we addressed it, as they mentioned. I know we tried to get into the southeastern Essex district. We tried to get into Reading. The towns voted no. They did not want town-wide sewerage. That's what we're going to have to do at some point, somehow. It's going to have to be a town-wide problem. We're not addressing a town-wide problem right now. And like I say, there's too much information, misinformation, as to what we are going to do, what we're going to get out of the program. And therefore, I urge you to vote against it because I don't think you have the proper information in front of you.
Mrs. O'Brien. The motion is to terminate debate. On the motion to terminate debate, all those in favor of terminating debate, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Motion is unanimous. Under our bylaws, the proponents have 2 minutes to wrap up their case. Do you need 2 minutes to wrap up your case, Mr. Hanlon? I think that the people would appreciate it if you...
Thank you for your time.
Okay. On the motion, which requires a 2/3 vote, I don't think I'll even try for a unanimous count on this one. So all those in favor, please raise your right hand, and would my tellers please go to work. Mr. Reitmeyer. 38. 38. Mr. Mosseri. 75. Mr. Jones. 64. 64. All those opposed, please raise your right hand. Mr. Reitmeyer.
10.
10. Mr. Mosseri. 14. Mr. Jones. 13 or 30? 13. The vote is 177 in favor, 37 opposed. The motion achieves the required 2/3 plurality. The motion is carried. Article 12, Mr. Smith.
Mr. Moderator, I move pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 4A, to authorize the Board of Selectmen to sign an amendment to the intermunicipal agreement between the town of Andover and the town of North Reading for potable water service to increase the additional maximum amount delivered to North Reading pursuant to the agreement from 1.5 million gallons per day to no more than 1.568 million gallons per day.
You've heard the motion. Does the Finance Committee have a recommendation? Mr. Jones Senior.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation? Mr. Smith.
Board of Selectmen recommend.
Is there any further discussion? Okay, according to the motion in front of us, move to, pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 4A, to authorize the Board of Selectmen to sign an amendment to the intermunicipal agreement between the town of Andover and the town of North Reading for potable water service to increase the additional maximum amount delivered to North Reading pursuant to the agreement from 1.5 million gallons per day to no more than 1.568 million gallons.
No, we're voting what the article, what the reading of the article was.
The
The
article,
moderator has the right number.
the article says, to see if the town will vote pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 40, Section 4A, to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into an amended intermunicipal agreement with the town of Andover for potable water service, such amendment to increase the amount of water available to the town of North Reading to 1.7 million gallons per day. This puts an upper limit to the amount of water that the selectmen are empowered to negotiate. To make a motion for a lesser amount is within the four corners of the article and is therefore acceptable. If the motion were for 1.8 million gallons, that would be in excess of the limits of the article and would be beyond the four corners of the article and therefore would be out of order. But the motion that is before us is in fact in order. Any further discussion? Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. I just have a question about rates. Do we get a lesser rate if we take more water, or do we have the same rate?
Mr. Hanlon.
Yes, we trip a threshold with the more we buy from Andover, and we get a discount.
Can you tell us what those rates are? Is that possible to
Well,
pop it?
it's our rate from Andover is 20% more than their residential rate. And the last 3 years, we've either been at or over what we're allowed to take, which allows us to take advantage of the 20% discount. This amendment allows us to draw that much more water during the summer periods, of course, and that helps us trip the threshold that much quicker to get the discounted rate.
All right, but we're still paying.
I think the point you're trying to make, Mr. O'Brien, is that we're paying more for the water that we buy from Andover than we get for it when we sell it to our residents. Is that what you're trying to say?
You're looking through the plexiglass of my forehead. You can see what I'm trying to think. That's what I'm boiling down to is...
That is really not
This-
germane to the motion before us.
This helps us to get
Thank
the
you, Mr.
discounted
Moderator.
rate.
Any further discussion? Gentleman, Mr. Piero.
I'd like to know one thing. We said per day, 10 million point seven. In the summertime, I believe. How about in the wintertime? Or this is just to divide around the figures for the year?
Mr. Hanlon.
During the wintertime, we don't buy water from Andover unless we have a serious down situation in our own production.
Yeah, but we have
That 100 and, by the way, the trip is about 184 minus million gallons per year that we purchase from Andover. That is between the months of April and September. And again, last year we were at 242.2 million gallons. So we got the discount. As the town grows, with the sprinkler systems and so forth, the demands and the stress on the system, we have to buy more water from Andover. This amendment allows us to buy a little more, and therefore we continue on a better opportunity to get the discounted rate.
Mr. Handel, Is that because you get the discount, we're gonna get more water, or it's needed?
Yes, you get it because you buy more.
But we need it. We use it.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Gentleman at the aisle, Mr. Smith.
Are we going from 1 million gallons a day to 1.568, or 1.5 to 1.568 into 68,000
The
gallons?
latter, the latter statement.
Is there much point in going from 1.5 to 1.568? You're adding 1%.
It's not a lot, but it's more rather than less.
Is that the most we can do? Why aren't we asking for 2?
The town of Andover has asked this for the warrant. This has been initiated because the town of Andover would like to make this amendment.
In other words, Mr. Hanlon, this has been a negotiated settlement, and we're asking town meeting to ratify
Right, it's
the
been a
settlement that has
negotiation
been
between the two
negotiated.
towns, right. We have a 20-year contract that allows us to buy the water from Andover. We're about 8 years into it. Certainly, over the 20-year period, you can expect some amendments. Has to be agreed at both town meetings.
Any further discussion? Hearing none. Can town council advise me whether this requires anything other than a simple majority? We'll take the vote and see you later. On the motion before us, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Unanimous. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Article 13. Mr. Smith.
Mr. Moderator, I move to appropriate the sum of $75,000 to be used with the appropriation under Article 14 of the April 1998 town meeting for the purpose of replacing and equipping a fire pumper, and that to meet this appropriation, the treasurer, with the approval of the Board of Selectmen, is authorized to borrow said sum.
You've heard the motion. This is a motion that requires borrowing and therefore will require two-thirds vote.
Point of order,
Sir,
Mr. Moderator.
state your point of order, please.
Why are we skipping from 12 to 14? Are we skipping number 13?
No, I think that we are on 13. We are on 13, and the motion that is before me is on Article 13. Pardon me, correction. Let me just call to your attention that what we are trying to do is we're trying to supplement the monies that were appropriated under Article 14 of the April 1998 town meeting. In other words, 2 years ago. That was 14. Right now, we're on Article 13.
Yeah,
Mr. Smith.
Just a quick explanation. What happened in 1998, we had appropriated a certain amount of money and put it into a fund toward the purchase of this truck. This amount of money is in addition to that amount of money, so that we presently now, if this article is approved, we'll have enough money to buy that truck instead of appropriating the whole $200,000 and $300,000, whatever it was, for the purchase of the truck. This additional $75,000 will be enough to purchase the truck.
Now that we're done with the preliminaries, let's hear the recommendation of the Finance Committee from Mr. Jones Sr. Mr. Jones Sr.
Mr. Moderator, the Finance Committee recommends, only repeating what was previously said, at a town meeting 2 years ago, $200,000 was approved for a new pumper. There was an evolution of thought in what kind of equipment, et cetera, the fire department will need, and I'll leave Chief O'Brien to explain that. This $75,000 is to supplement or be added to the $200,000 to buy one new pumper vehicle.
Does the Board of Selectmen have a recommendation, Mr. Smith?
Board of Selectmen recommend.
Is there any further discussion? Mrs. Jennings.
Diana Jenkins, 226 Haverhill Street. I move to pass over Article 13, capital expenditures, until Article 14, operating budgets, is complete.
The proper wording is a motion to postpone consideration, and that falls under our bylaw on postponements, which is fairly recent and requires a two-thirds vote. Point of order by Mr. Burton.